So be man.
All makes sense. That's okay. But I was thinking about the king of the bells.
That's awesome. Thank you. Did you say how big theirs were? I'm curious.
Yeah.
Good. The sun's out, spring is here. Oh, yeah. I wouldn't be able to do it if it had hash. It's the whole department.
You keep this.
Yeah.
Well, we started in January. How's it going?
Hi.
Hi. Easter purple or just color?
Beer.
Let me transfer that.
Oh, I'll let.
Okay, so remind me of. There was something else I was trying to remember. What?
I'll send her email right now too, just so she knows that.
Okay. I was gonna ask for help because I've got to transfer both games this weekend.
Okay, it's for this weekend.
Yeah. Oh, Jake's not good.
How about yourself?
Do you have a plug?
Yeah. Stuck. My friends there.
Okay, we'd like to welcome everyone and call to order the study meeting of the West Valley City Council. It is March 26th, 2024. We're beginning our meeting at 4:30 p.m. in the multi-purpose room of West Valley City Hall. Members of the council present are Councilman Norfelt, Councilman Fitzsimonu, Councilman Whetstone, Councilman Harmon, Councilman Christensen. Myself will excuse Councilman Yoon. We're also joined at the table with our interim assistant city manager, Mr. Flores, and our city recorder, Ms. Kamick. We'll now move to our minutes of March 19th, 2024. I'll turn them to the council for discussion or a motion.
I move for approval of those minutes.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those stand approved. We'll go to our regular meeting for this evening. Are there any questions from the council during the meeting?
No questions, but wanted to bring something up on that.
Okay,
For the Parks and Rec fees. It's basically the senior and the military golf fees.
okay.
It's about 30 to 40% of a discount. And I just looking at the other golf courses, other city and municipal courses outside of West Valley. And they're typically only $2 or $3 discount for 9 holes. So wondered if there was, I just want us to be more profitable. And I'm sure my neighborhood that are golfers are not, the seniors are not going to be excited, but I think we could probably get more in line with the other golf courses in the valley if we get $3 off for 9 holes instead of 7. That's what it was last I looked at it. Just a thought. Anybody has interest in making that change?
Is there anyone else that would like to make that change?
I think military was also the other one. They're both 30 or 40% discounts, so. And if you go to the Salt Lake City golf courses, it's just $2, $2 or $3.
So is
depending on
that
the course,
more of a 10%?
like closer to 10.
Okay,
I think it seems like we round up, you know, it's 10%, but then to get to an even dollar, we go to 3 or.
or whatever. Well, now, different places, I think, does about 10% discount, but I only go for senior, I don't go for.
Yeah, our fitness
Yeah, there-
center, I think is it 10%?
10%.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So if we can,
Do we have an idea of the volume of, or the frequency that discounts redeemed?
I can find that out. I would assume that the senior rate is redeemed a lot more frequently than the military veteran rate, but we do have the military and veteran league. But I can email and find that out and let you know today. I don't know the frequency of the military discount, but I can find that out quickly.
any other comments?
I think it's worth looking at. Want to make sure that we maintain a discount for seniors military, but to make it in line with what we have for the fitness center. And other things, and maybe there was a reason we went with that. Much of a discount, I'm not sure, but it's worth looking at.
Okay, so would you like to continue it 1 week? I leave it to the council to decide if they just want to move it or continue for 1 week and then give staff an opportunity to next study session, give us a presentation, and then we could vote on it that evening.
Okay.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, all right. Was there anything else on the agenda that you had questions about? Did you have any changes?
No, no changes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think it's wiser to study it than just shoot at it tonight.
We will have to just have that motion in the regular meeting, just.
Right, they'll make a motion to continue.
Yep.
And you can either specify a date or. Okay, so just put that in the motion, please. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay, we're trying to make Nicole's life as easy as possible. All right. So we'll have 3 public hearings next week. Our first one is going to be application Z1 2024, and we'll turn the time over to Mr. Pastrick. Our next 3 items are going to be the Mr. Pastrick show. Or are you really online, not in person?
Here.
Oh, there he is. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. This first item is actually one that we discussed last week, so I just had one item to add unless there are questions. So, Mayor, you had asked about storage and screening of storage, and what the code says is that the Planning Commission can require a taller wall up to 8 feet, so going from 6 to 8 feet. The code doesn't actually prohibit items that are being stored to exceed the height of the fence, but there have been examples where, as part of a conditional use, there's been a condition that basically says that you can't store things that exceed the height of the fence. So that's one way that could be addressed, but the code doesn't actually say that.
Okay. So this is our second look at this application. Did anybody have any more questions on it before next week? Okay. Then let's move to application ZT2 2024.
Thank you. So this is an ordinance change that we're suggesting as staff. And it's making several changes to our parking standards. And to provide a little bit of background, so we've actually had parking standards in our code since incorporation to set minimum ratios, if you will, for parking. And there's been a number of revisions to that over the years. The most recent, like comprehensive change was made over 20 years ago. And this latest one is, and I should clarify, the changes we're proposing are all to commercial uses. So I know the council's had a lot of discussion about residential standards, so we're not proposing any adjustments to residential standards, just commercial. And there are two national publications that we use to base our changes on. The first is one that's called Parking Generation. It's from the Institute of Transportation Engineers. It's in its 6th edition, so this is a publication that's been out for many years. And what they do in that publication is they look at a variety of land uses, everything from a daycare to a, bakery to, housing, and look at different locations, even in different states, and look at what the parking demand is for those different uses. And as they come out with these new editions of that publication, over time, there are adjustments to those numbers. We also used a publication called Shared Parking, and what that looks at is when you have developments that have different uses within them, there are uses that have different peak times. So as an example, if you have, let's say, a development that has an office building and a movie theater, right? So an office building peak time is during the day, movie theaters at night. And so there's the ability to share parking where they don't need their highest demand parking for both uses all of the time. So that's what that resource is about. So in summary, what we're looking at is a number of uses that would see reduced parking ratios. The one exception would be for like a sit-down restaurant. We found from the publications there that they recommended a slightly higher standard for a sit-down restaurant. But for all the others, we're suggesting a reduction. And again, I'm happy to go through the specifics if the council would like to walk through those. So that's one main change is, for the most part, reducing parking for certain commercial uses. And then we're also updating the section that deals with shared parking. And let me explain why that matters. So in that shared parking table, we're adding additional uses and also clarifying or adding more times throughout the day. So as an example, right now, the shared parking table looks at the, basically from like the morning till like 6 p.m. and then after 6 p.m. So we're adding now, you have a morning, a midday, and evening time frame. And again, if I can give a specific example here. So right now in our shared parking, we look at restaurants, whether it's a fast food restaurant or a sit-down restaurant, it's just a restaurant. But what we found as we did the research is that a fast food restaurant, its peak time is actually at lunch, right? Whereas a sit-down restaurant, their peak time is more in the evening hours. So by making that distinction of having a kind of a morning time, an afternoon, and an evening allows us to get more accurate in those shared parking calculations. So, sorry, I know that gets into a lot of a number of minutia there, but to sum up, it's for the most part reducing several commercial parking standards and then also updating shared parking standards.
So in theory, this could allow for more pad sites in some locations because they don't need as much parking. And it would also require more parking in sit-down restaurants.
A little bit, but yes. And really what we were trying to accomplish here, and I think always with parking is you want to have enough so that people, for convenience, people have a place to park, but you also don't want to park too much because it's expensive and can limit the economic development potential of a property if you're requiring more parking than what's actually needed.
And with this being informed by information from this, like the National Parking Organization, is there any accounting or any discrepancy that you see in our local Utah or West Valley dynamic versus what they're saying nationally?
We haven't really seen a major departure. What, in fact, as we talked with our planning commission, they actually made the comment, they felt like in some commercial developments, we were requiring too much parking and that there's often a surplus of in commercial settings. And so I feel like these numbers are pretty reflective of what we're seeing, that we're a little too high and that and adjustments needed.
Okay, any other questions? All right, let's move on to application ZT1 2024.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is another proposal by staff to amend several sections of the code. And in summary, there are two changes that are being proposed here. The first would be to update what we refer to as a trigger for improvements. And the second would be to allow something we haven't before and what we're calling a cash in lieu of improvements. Okay, so the first one, we've had in our code for since the 80s, a trigger of $50,000. So if someone's spending $50,000, let's say on a building expansion or a new building, that would be the trigger that would require them to put in, whether it's landscaping or other offsite improvements. Okay. Well, again, that was done in two different ordinances. One was in 84, the other was in 88 as it relates to street improvements. So if you just look at just simply inflation, right, that would put that 50,000 to closer to $150,000 today. And so that first change is just making that adjustment for inflation and using 150,000 for the trigger.
I know the hospital just bought one new piece of equipment and it triggered a whole new landscaping and all kinds of things.
Right. And
They hit the 50,000
right,
plus.
we're finding that you can sneeze and spend 50,000 these days. It's that number is pretty outdated. And then the second is an option, and I'll emphasize that this is an option that the city, it would be at the city's discretion whether we use this. So a developer cannot say, hey, I want to use this cash in lieu of improvements. It's the decision lies solely with the city whether we would do this. Okay. So there are situations where previously we may have used a delay agreement, but I know the council's direction has been, we really don't want to use delay agreements. So what this would do is in a situation where, let's say you have a property where, again, there's no other improvements on a street and there's really nothing to tie into, particularly for stormwater. The city engineer would use basically current pricing for, curb, gutter, sidewalk, to have the owner essentially make a payment to the city that we would hang on to until such time that we had enough funds to put improvements in on that section of road. So it's essentially getting the delay agreement up front, right? We're getting the payment up front and holding on to that until we can make the improvements at a later date. So that's the intent, is to add that as an option. And again, it would be at the city's discretion when that would be used. So we can still say in a situation where we think it makes sense to just get the improvements done, we just say, yep, you need to put the improvements in, and we're not offering that as an option. But there are situations we feel like this would be a good tool to have as an option.
Okay, to the council.
Just curious if that would create issues where the developer has made that payment and then maybe it's years before the street or other improvements are put in and the residents are thinking, I know that there was a payment made for improvements, where are they? And
Right.
That's an issue.
It could be that it could be years before we see or have enough funds to make an improvement. So that's certainly a possibility.
Well, on like 5250, I think's the street, where we've just had two new developments across from each other. We had past developments that we've done the delay agreement. What's the odds of those developers really still having the funds to put that in? So I'd rather have the funds, because it still isn't in, because we don't have enough to make it continuing. So I'd rather have the funds in a separate account that we can put it in when it becomes one long continuous piece.
Right, and I think that's, if I'm understanding, that's really the intent, is
Yeah.
that trying to collect delay agreements years down the road has proven very challenging.
Yeah.
And this way, the owner's off the hook because they've made the payment. And then we just have to keep track of that to say, okay, they've made the contribution, and from this point forward, we're not going to ask that of them. And we have the money set aside, so.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think we've had, my perception has been that we've lost out on a lot of income, and we've had to put the infrastructure in later, the sidewalk, curb and gutter, without any help from the developer, because the delay agreements have been too hard to get later, because sometimes it is 10 years.
I will say that as we've talked with Public Works, our first position will always be, let's get the improvements, right? There really has to be, a justification for why we would not get the improvements. And again, the most, one of the examples we showed the Planning Commission was a situation where there was just there's no stormwater infrastructure, and putting in curb and gutter just led to water going nowhere, basically. And in that a situation like that, I think having that tool would have been helpful.
Okay. Any other questions?
Does this happen frequently enough that we might need to look at the development agreements and the ability to enforce on those?
So we have, it's not very common. There have been situations where we have addressed improvements in a development agreement. But those are usually more projects that are dealing with like a zone change. Oftentimes we'll have a property where it's already zoned, right? They don't need a rezone. We can't require a development agreement, so we just have to go with what's in the ordinance. And so, but in instances where we can require a development agreement, which again would be like a zone change, in those instances, we can and have put in, for example, requiring dedication and improvements on a certain road or things like that. Does that answer your question?
I think I might not have asked it the way I wanted to, but in a situation like the mayor had raised, where years down the road, a payment was, we weren't able to collect, or because like you said, we'll go ahead and do the improvement, right? But is that something that we need to strengthen, or?
So I think based on council's previous direction of not doing delay agreements, that option's still in the code, but we've not been exercising that option. So what we're saying is in situations where we feel like the improvements, putting them in right now would not make sense, we won't do a delay agreement. We'll just take the cash now and hold on to it.
That makes sense, and that addresses the situation that was brought up previously.
So I think we had one example in the recent past where there's gonna be a development close to, I wanna say Bangor. And because Bangor was gonna make you redo that, whatever you do now, make you redo that in 2 years from now, that we would just take a delay agreement on that, so that we didn't have to do it twice.
Right, and there may be, I know there's been maybe a couple of situations where we felt like, okay, we feel like a delay agreement still makes sense, but in that case, we could have, if this option were available, could have taken cash instead in that case.
Are the funds actually held in a separate account, or do we just keep record of that development?
Yeah, we would have to account for these funds separately, and we haven't done that yet because if this passes, then yeah, we would set that up so that these are being accounted for separately from other funds.
Okay, seeing no other questions. Thank you. All right, we now have our quarterly reopening of our 23-24 budget. And we'll turn the time over to Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mayor. As was mentioned, this is our third quarterly budget opening. The previous ones were done in September and December. We'll have another one that comes up in June, and the budget opening is a term that's used to describe adjustments that are required to be made to the existing budget that's approved by the city council as the regular course of doing business. This budget opening is a little smaller than the other ones because we've been able to take care of most of the rollovers, which are projects that we're carrying over from previous periods. So first, we have a couple of grants. We have the annual allocation for CDBG and housing projects. That's $1.6 million. And then we also received an EMS grant from the state of Utah for the fire department. And those are the two sources of grants that we've come in on this budget opening. The other ones, all the budget openings are listed on this one page. And we have some of the ones of note. We have several that are coming from the fire department to move money from our capital improvement fund. And the practice has been that when they do deployments outside of state or when they've done partnership deployments for other fires, active sites, that we will bill them for our time and our equipment and things like that. And we put that back into CIP so that that money can then be used for paying for the equipment that's being worn out and the overtime that's being incurred. And so all of these that are listed by deployment and to the fire department have to do with those type of reimbursements. And it looks like we're headed into another fire season here, so we'll probably start to see some of those come up. Hopefully not too many. We also have another one of note is the 4700 South Bangerter betterment improvements, which were requested. And that's $2 million, which was transferred to the CIP from general fund balance. When things get transferred to CIP for this type of a project, they can only be spent on that project as the designation by the city council is. So that's where that money is, and that's the only place it will be spent. Let's see, we have another one that will be a CIP expenditure, the Fazio Park fence replacement. You'll remember that discussion in city council, and that will be spent from the capital improvement fund. The funds are designated specifically for that project.
So that fence is complete. And everybody's very pleased with the new fence.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Happy to hear that.
So,
Money at work.
yes.
I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about this or the process. And it looks, fairly straightforward, and we've got most of them knocked out of the park now. So
Can we get an explanation, or as much of one as Ms. Kamick can help us with, is to why we have an additional cost to this last year's election?
Yep, so the county didn't anticipate, or they gave us a estimate, and it was significantly, well, it was $60,000 more than what we had budgeted. We came back, expressed our concern. They said they're gonna give us more accurate estimates in the future. So hopefully this will be a one-time thing, but
Okay,
yep, that's kind of where we're at.
just mainly some inflation or something on their part they didn't
Yeah, it was
anticipate?
more like postage, everything just came in more expensive than they anticipated. So our actual costs were just increased.
it's a prime example of why sometimes it's always easier to overestimate a little bit than underestimate.
Yep.
And we ended up short on this one by 60,000. So
Because it costs us usually around two something.
It has varied. It can go anywhere from like the low 100,000s up to 200,000.
Okay,
This year with just some cities doing ranked choice, some doing traditional inflation costs, they just miscalculated.
okay.
So, we let them know that that wasn't great. So they plan on, giving us more accurate estimates in the future.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
thank you.
All right, we'll now move on to our streetlights. Turn the time to Mr. Johnson for resolution 24-51.
Good evening, Dan Johnson, Public Works Director. This is a resolution requesting authorization from the council to purchase streetlights from Mountain States Lighting. We do this periodically. We keep a stock of streetlight poles and fixtures in our yard for projects we have coming up, or just replacement lights that have been knocked down. You may recall we recently hired our second electrician, so we're actually going through things a little quicker. And so this actually will require a budget opening. We're requesting this $155,000 to come out of our streetlight fund balance. But we'll fill up our stores for the upcoming year for what we think we're gonna need for this next fiscal year.
Okay. Any questions from the council on this item? Okay, thank you.
Yep.
We have our consent agenda, which is the conveyance of two quitclaim and easement documents for the Brighton Canal Company. Does anybody have any questions from Mr. Flores or Mr. Johnson on those? They're pretty standard items. Okay, seeing nothing, we'll have a communication item from Mr. Johnson concerning the Bangor Highway update.
Back. Dan Johnson, Public Works Director. Yeah, the council requested an update on what's happening with Bangor Highway. And so I'm here and I'm going to give you my best shot at all the right answers. Katie Corianos from the project team is also here to correct anything that I say that is spoken incorrectly. So I'll give it my best shot, but I'm going to start with the 4700 South update, just to give you a heads up of what's happening out there. This project, as you all well know, is under construction. They have recently completed the aqueduct construction. It's flowing water now and it's in service again. And they say that went well. And they've recently had a few traffic not interrupted, but changes. They've done some weekend work and some things that have been kind of a precursor, a micro welcoming of the major reconstruction work that's going to happen out there. And you'll continue to see stuff like that until about June. June, they're going to enact the full closure on Bangor Highway on Bangor of 47th East and West. So from June to June 24 to June of 25, there will be no east-west access through Bangor Highway at 4700 South. There will be 3 lanes approaching 47th South, both north and south. One of those lanes will drop. And so through the 4700 South interchange, there will be 2 lanes in each direction going north and south. But UDOT feels confident that actually will handle that okay and will not be terribly congested. I think Mr. Harmon had something.
When they did those weekend closures, 40th got a lot of extra traffic.
Yeah.
And I know we have on the calendar to do 40th between 41st and 47th sometime. When is that gonna happen?
Well, we are likely to start design this summer.
Okay.
And so I think by the time we are actually complete, are ready to build it, Bangor will likely be, at least that closure will be
open.
completed.
Okay.
Yeah,
That was my only question.
that's what I anticipate.
Yeah, neighbor.
Yeah.
Yep. And
Interesting to get out on 40th on the weekends,
yeah,
out of my driveway.
oh, during that closure.
Weekend closures, yeah.
Yeah, it there certainly has potential to make that real messy. And so both 47th and 54th are going to see additional traffic impact. We've already spoken with UDOT and they will be monitoring those intersections and adjusting the traffic signal timing to hopefully help that to operate a little bit better during that full closure. So from June to June, it's closed, and then they're anticipating a completion of roughly November of 25, right, Katie? Okay, I guess, do you have any questions on 47th South, what that might look like and how that's going? So that's one. Mr. Welch mentioned the Bangor betterment. They're all full aware of the Bangor going underneath 47th, and it's going to be a really nice addition. And so Don't have anything else to add unless Katie has something that I missed.
No.
Okay,
Okay, and we don't have to worry about any pedestrian tunnels on this part of the improvement of Bangor.
no pedestrian tunnels on this part of Bangor.
We'll just keep fighting to not have them on the other.
We'll talk about those in just a moment here. Mr. Whetstone?
That was my question.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, they are not building the trail, any part of the trail on this particular phase, like on 47th South. It kind of, the trail and the governor's initiative on trails came in after 4700 South had been really initiated. UDOT went in and figured out how they're gonna fit a trail in there to get part of it. I mean, they don't really know how we're getting over 47th yet. I think there's a lot of questions to be answered on how that works, but it's there's no tunnels there, and it's
Okay.
Anyways, Taylorsville is actually working on a little project to connect the Utah and Salt Lake Canal Trail that ends at Bangor on their side of 47th. So they're working on something that'll get a trail north to 47th, and then on the south side of the road, they're working on kind of a widened sidewalk scenario that'll get you across 40th from Bangor to 40th, and then to the Utah and Salt Lake Canal Trail that's west of 40th. So that's something that Taylorsville's working on. They actually got an appropriation from the state for some improvements on 47th that'll take care of stuff like that. And so, and we're also working with them. We will do a rotomill and overlay from 3600 west to 40th west as a betterment to this project. So we'll clean up the pavement that's kind of bumpy. That is our responsibility.
Okay.
So.
Any other questions? Okay,
Okay, so that's 47th. Now I think the thing you're really most excited to learn about is the conclusion of the environmental study to decide what Bangor would look like from 41st South to California Avenue. And that recently, they finally got that approved or finalized. It's been weeks now. It's just a few weeks ago that document was finally completed. And we've now got Brian Atkinson here, who's also from the project team, who will also correct things that I say that are incorrect. But so I think all of you are quite familiar with what that study did. It really took a big picture look at where access will be. And this document did kind of clear a footprint to build a trail, a parallel trail that we would use unused right-of-way acquisition from home acquisitions and things like that to put that trail in. And so, so that is included in this document. As part of this document, UDOT's preferred alternative has access at 41st South, 35th South, skipping 31st. 31st will not have access to or from Bangor. And then Parkway Boulevard will. And then 27th South, 2400 South is serviced by kind of frontage roads that are adjacent to the SR 201 interchange. And so big picture, that's how the transportation facility shook out. I know there was discussion. We had some public comment requesting that 41st South not have access to and from Bangor. And UDOT did extensive traffic evaluation, and ultimately that's one of the things that they figured out in their environmental study is that yes, we need access, and it is included, and there will be an interchange at 41st South. One of the things that also came out of this study was originally there was going to be no access, no left turn access at all to the old Granger Medical property. There was going to be islands and things like that generally you want to limit access to properties that are really close to freeways because it gets pretty complicated the closer you get. But UDOT found a way. They heard that the option was if you needed to get to Granger Medical from the east, you would have to go through Bangor, flip a UE and come back and make a right turn into that property. And they recognized the hardship there and found a way to make a left turn in work. And so you can make a left in and a right in. I don't believe you can make a left out, right? No left out. But the folks in that neighborhood that are around Granger Medical will be able to make that kind of a U-turn there and access their property from that as well as the Granger Medical property. So that was a good outcome of this process that we're happy with. And then, of course, you heard lots from your neighbors and our residents about pedestrian underpasses or tunnels associated with the trail. And I believe between 41st and 35th, there were 3 crossings proposed. And UDOT, and so the council drafted a letter and said, we don't want tunnels. Our people don't want tunnels, and we as staff support you in that. And the department heard you, but they did not necessarily come to final resolution. Essentially, they renamed each one of those crossings. Instead of calling them pedestrian underpasses, they called them pedestrian crossings. And they're gonna punt that to the design team for when this thing actually gets funded and when we can actually really make real final decisions on what this thing will look like. So in the environmental document, they just decided to kick that down the road and there is no final determination on whether they're over or under. But we're heard and UDOT generally is really good at listening to us in the design process, and we have an impact and a voice. And so can't guarantee that we won't be dissatisfied with anything, but I think there's a good chance that we can come to some kind of resolution with something that will probably be more satisfactory to the city. So
Do we have cost estimates on the difference between under and over?
no, and I don't think, I mean, for us, that doesn't matter to us. I mean, and I think it matters to UDOT, but that's not the governing factor. For them, they're looking at to take a structure over, you're kind of doing the zigzag thing to get up and over. And I mean, from a usability standpoint, I think their preference would be your users have a better experience keeping things close to the ground and not having to do the zigzag thing. But if we can figure out how to make it all work without having negative impacts to the residents, I think that's UDOT's ultimate desire, to have something that everybody loves, but I don't think they had the time or really the ability to come to a final resolution. I think one of UDOT's main goals was to get a completed document that they could actually start, because with an approved document, that way they can actually get funding and then they can buy right of way and can start moving. And this ends up being a relatively small detail that, in the big picture of things can be worked out later. So
I'm just wondering, we did a betterment for 47th that we paid for.
yeah,
Would that be considered a betterment for the 41st?
well, it certainly could, but I don't know that it would be necessarily. I think,
Well, I talked to my daughter the other day and she hasn't been in an underpass under I-5 since she was 5 years old.
Mm.
She's now got a 12-year-old grandson.
yeah,
So, and she still is traumatized from that time.
mm.
So,
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of ways to come up with solutions to this thing, and it could be bridges, and it really could be, and which is, I guess when you compare the from UDOT's, and these guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but this ends up from their big picture objectives, it's kind of a small element, as far as where's access. Those big highway bridges are obviously a much more expensive thing than the associated trail. And so, which is why I think it's just, I don't think they felt like they could adequately solve the problem during this, solve the problem to a point where we are satisfied. They certainly could have said, sorry, West Valley City, we think that they're going to be pedestrian underpasses and it's better. And here's your, here's your system, but they didn't. And so I think the fact that they push this down the road gives us an opportunity to continue to come up with different solutions.
There wasn't anything more vocal from us than pedestrian crossings.
Sure.
And to have them punt that, really is unfortunate because everything else we were pretty quiet on, we were
Yeah.
okay with.
Yep.
But to have them punt on what we were most wanting,
Yeah, no, I understand that. And I guess,
sorry, it's pretty obvious that they punted, you know, when you look at the report.
no, they did.
Everything's there and it's like, to be determined at a future date.
Yep.
It's like,
No, for sure. They absolutely did, and they'll tell you that they did.
And they do have overpasses, pedestrian overpasses further south of us, correct?
Oh, sure. Yeah, they do. Yep.
So that's why I don't see why it's such a
Well, and
difficult.
And I think
decision to
ultimately,
make.
I think they could ultimately do it if it's, what's in the best interest of the city. But until we have a final design, I really think that, I mean, not that I have a say in it, this is their project, but I understand why they did it, just because it's complicated and ultimately they just needed to finish their document and whether we go over or under with the pedestrians doesn't really impact the amount of property that you need to purchase. And so the things that affect the environmental document are really already, they're unchanged, whether it's pedestrian over or under, and they just needed to get something done. And UDOT's been working with from what we hear, they're still shooting for around 2027 to get funding. And if it gets funding, which we think that our team member, the UDOT folks think that it's likely that this thing gets at least partially funded very shortly, then UDOT has the freedom to start buying the houses that they need when they come available and giving people the opportunity to, you know, if they want to get out sooner, gives them that flexibility to get them out. Whereas if they don't have an approved environmental document, they can't. So not here to defend UDOT and their decision to not make a decision yet, but that's the decision. So
But they pretty much understand we're not giving up on this.
I think they
Heard it loud and clear.
the feelings of the city about tunnels.
Okay.
well, and these may not be your words, but the pedestrian crossings seem like a small thing for UDOT. But,
In the neighborhood, they're a big thing.
yeah, for our
Absolutely.
residents.
No, they absolutely are.
huge.
Yep, they are.
You've got the people that are having to move, that are losing their homes. This is already hard for them, but then those that are left right there lose their
They
neighbors.
have a tunnel where their neighbor once was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then they get this tunnel that has unwanted.
Shenanigans,
Worried about the safety of the
for sure.
youth in the
Mhm.
neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think, you know, there's 3 crossings in that 1 mile stretch. It may make sense that we may say, you know what, we don't think that you need to have that pedestrian crossing. Maybe there's one by the high school and that's it.
Well, then that's the one I would get rid of.
And maybe it's not a tunnel,
The one
right?
in the subdivisions that, you know. is-
Yeah.
But these, again, I think, we can certainly have those conversations and they're really not that far out. 2027 is right around the corner.
But are we gonna have a conversation or are they just gonna make it, you know, it sounds like they're just gonna make the decision.
It's been my experience with them that they'll listen to us, that there'll absolutely be a conversation. And if there's not, then we'll make sure there's a conversation. So, but there will be.
Yeah, truly, to just go down to 1 isn't that bad of an idea. So,
And
How
maybe
many,
it doesn't have to
how
be a
many
tunnel.
crossings are there between 47th and 98th?
Well, there's no trail, there's no parallel facility. I mean, there's 0,
Yes.
other than the school crossings.
yeah,
Yeah, there's school crossings, but these are all really built to accommodate, to provide access to and from the trail. And so we could say they're just not necessary.
because honestly, if you're walking to a trail,
You could go to the next
walk through
mile.
your neighborhood.
Mhm. You could go through your
go
neighborhood.
over it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah. There may be we may save UDOT some money and they can give us money back from a reverse bill,
Oh, yeah, sure.
right?
Well, it's-
They didn't respond to that at all.
There was a guy that talked to one of the council members about not having enough upfront parking at the fitness center. You had to park clear out there and walk in. He's like, what are you here to do? Walk the track? He's like, well, you're almost done then.
There you go.
Just do one last round and you're done. So it's just perception. And if it's only to connect the trail, I don't think it's that necessary.
Yeah, and so those will be, and really those will be the conversations that we'll have. Cause I don't really feel like UDOT's gonna be there to force something on us that we don't want.
Okay.
This is a trail that will likely have local maintenance responsibilities associated with it, just like Mountain View. And so that gives you a seat at the table to have a conversation about what it looks like. I mean, so
Well, the trail down by just coming out of Stonebridge, that's just because there's a trail there, it's gonna take 5 extra homes that may not have been taken.
yeah, they're,
For a
yeah,
trail.
yeah. No,
So,
the trail definitely had an impact.
Yeah.
It most certainly did. Yeah,
and it was a pretty harsh one.
Yep.
So,
for sure.
Okay.
Have I said anything that I shouldn't have said? That was not true? Any corrections that need to be made? Okay,
yeah, and if that overpass is just for a trail, maybe we can get rid of that one too. Okay, yeah, let's keep having discussions with them.
we will. Okay,
Any other questions for Mr. Pastrick?
or Mr. Johnson.
I mean, Dotson, sorry.
I'd rather Mr. Pastrick answer all of them.
It's Nick, so that's why my finger's on him. Okay,
Comment that the building there on 35th South is no longer there. That's where the sidewalk should be.
Oh.
Came down.
Oh, did it come down? Good, awesome.
Made me happy, so thank you.
That's awesome. We're grateful for that. Yeah, thank you, UDOT. That's not their project, so they don't get to take credit for it. But that's been a long time coming, that Hunsaker
Yeah.
County property. Now, there's one more across the street, but
Right.
one at a time is all we can do, so. Okay, thank you.
thanks. All right, now we'll turn the time to Mr. Pastrick for our general plan update.
Right, the general plan saga continues, right? You got the southwest part of the city to talk about this afternoon. This one's a little bit different, so I'm gonna share my screen. And we really just have one very large area to talk about today. All right. So this is what we're referring to the southwest. So from it's between 5400 South and the south border of the city, so 6600 South. And then wedged between Mountain View Quarter on the east and SR 111 on the west side. Okay, so over 800 acres. And in these two options that our consultant looked at, the first on the left assumed everything would be industrial. Okay. Then the one on the right assumed that the first half mile south of 5400 South would be industrial. And then south of that, you would have mostly single-family residential with a little bit of commercial by the interchange at Mountain View Corridor. Now, before we go into feedback here, there's a lot of background information I think it's helpful for the council to know here. So first of all, so here's just an aerial of, kind of zoomed out and zoomed in. So you have a mix of both manufacturing zoning north of 6200 South and then A2 zoning south of that. Option A is over 12 million square feet of industrial, so that's a lot. Option B had a small amount of commercial under 30,000 square feet, about half the industrial, and then over 550 homes under the second option. And what you have out there right now is you have sand and gravel extraction, which you can see in these three areas here. You have vacant property, and then there's also some utilities or some utility companies that own some facilities. So here's zoning for that area. So the ring here is the outer extent of the overpressure zone. This darker gray is the manufacturing. So right now, north of 62 in kind of this area is manufacturing. You can see the residential zoning here on either side of the area we're talking about. But that hopefully gives you an idea of what at least zoning wise, what's in this area, immediate vicinity. So the council may have heard about this, but I think this is a really important point to make here. So this is zoomed out a little bit further. And you may have heard that there was a property swap that occurred between Northrop Grumman and Kennecott. And this actually was recorded with the county just recently. And the blue property up until just recently was owned by Northrop Grumman. But in a property swap, that property in blue is now owned by Kennecott. And Kennecott does not plan on using that for mining. They will be developing the property. So why that's a pretty significant occurrence, in that you're talking about close to 1,000 acres that we thought previously would remain as Northrop Grumman, not developed ever, and now it will be developed. So I know that's not all within the area we're talking about, but I think it's important to know that because it's in the vicinity for sure. So with that in mind, this map shows you property ownership. So this part of the city has a lot of very large ownership. And so starting in the north, this kind of greenish blue color is actually the federal government. So the Navy holds that. The property in red is what now Northrop Grumman owns within the city, as well as some property outside the city. The blue is Kennecott. You can see Hexcel here in kind of this pale green color. This green here is Staker Parsons, so gravel extraction. Orange is Kilgore, so another sand and gravel operation. And then this kind of the black color here is Geneva. So those are the three operating sand and gravel operations. And then the remainder is you have both the yellow and the purple are, so you have both Property Reserve Inc. and Deseret Title Holding. Those are essentially real estate holdings for the LDS Church. And so that kind of gives you a picture of what's in this larger area. This one I thought, if you haven't seen this before, is pretty interesting. So within the city, you'd never know this without being in the far southwest corner, but there's actually about 1,000 feet of elevation change from the far northeast corner to the far southwest corner of the city. So most of the city's pretty flat in that red area, but as you move to the southwest, you start getting a lot higher. And so you have some pretty nice views as you move out in that direction. So just some pictures as before. So this is, and many of these, there's not a whole lot to see because there's not much out here. But from this angle on 54, you have Hexcel on the north end of this area. This is the one on the left is looking west along 54. So you can see Hexcel out in the distance. And then this is looking east towards the Wasatch on 54 at Mountain View. So again, from 54 looking south on Mountain View, on the left and on the right, it's at 6200 south of Mountain View looking south. This image here on the left is looking west from 6200 south in Mountain View. So you can see again the equipment there for the sand and gravel extraction. One on the right is looking east back towards the Wasatch. One on the left here is looking west on 62, but a little bit away from or west of Mountain View. And then now we're on the one on the right, you're looking to the southeast, so that the housing development there to the right is actually in the city. That's the Wood Hollow development, kind of the far southwest corner at U-111. Few more. So this is one on the left is looking to the northwest along SR 111 from 62. And then again, looking on the right back towards the housing development to the southwest. Couple more. This is, and again, it's hard to, unless you're out there, it's hard to tell. This is actually pretty high up there. I tell people at this point of SR 111 is actually higher than Wasatch Boulevard, so its elevation is pretty high here. So you can't tell from here, but the property starts sloping off quite a bit from this point. All right, so before we go back to the discussion about should we do industrial or residential, and again, these are just, we have some sort of arguments for both, right? And in this, so the first is everything north of 62 is already zoned that way, so at least you have that precedent, and you've got the sand and gravel extract. If you talk with Hexcel, they love to have industrial everywhere around them, right? They don't want to have any residential neighbors because of the potential for conflicts there. You do have in this area, as I mentioned, you're kind of wedged between Mountain View and SR 111, which in and of themselves provide significant buffers. So you kind of have flexibility. You could almost do anything in this kind of middle ground in that you're sort of insulated, if you will. And then finally, and this is a general statement, but generally speaking, after you account for the providing services, industrial from a revenue perspective would be more positive to the city as opposed to residential. Then if you look at residential, you do have the Diamond Summit neighborhood on the east side of Mountain View that's, that's already there. So south of 62 and east of Mountain View. And then west of SR 111, you've got what's called Wood Hollow and Summit or Sunset Hills that are, so you do at least have in those cases residential already. We all know regionally, there's certainly a need for housing. In fact, I heard something the other day that said we're now, I think in the top 3 most expensive state in the country. Not a top 3 list you want to be in. And then you may recall that about a year or so ago, we actually at Northrop Grumman's request, we changed the overpressure zone so that one of them dropped out. And that was because they had consolidated their operations, which now allowed them to do this property swap. So in areas that previously were impacted by the overpressure are no longer. So with that background, I'll go back to the options here. And I'll tell you, as staff, we were kind of leaning towards sort of a middle approach. And that was doing industrial down to 6200 South and having residential south of 6200 South. And partly being because that's already zoned that way. And I'll say that we've had conversations with Geneva about this piece here, about actually doing industrial on that property. Now, they haven't submitted anything to this point, but that's something they're exploring. So with that, I'll stop talking and I'm all ears, what your thoughts are.
Okay, to the council.
This piece and the Kennecott Northrop Grumman Navy property to the north represents a huge amount of potential.
Right.
That in proximity to Salt Lake City downtown, that doesn't exist anywhere in the valley that I think of.
Right.
I think we should be very careful about this opportunity, make sure that it's not squandered and think about 50 years from now, 100 years from now, what could be here that we wish was here, but instead we just filled it in with, I don't know what, but I don't know that industrial and residential are the only options. But I don't own the property, so.
I can say maybe just to maybe help a little bit with that is that when Northrop did trade the property with Kennecott, So they were leasing property up outside the city from Kennecott, and in the swap, they now own that property. And so they will continue to operate here for a very long time. They have contracts that are 50 years out, right? So in terms of what you see that's owned by the federal government in the red, that will be here for a very long time. So we know at least that those industrial uses will continue for a long time. So I've just mentioned that while they did consolidate and do a swap, they've assured us that they're here for the long haul and their operation will continue.
Did that swap facilitate them building that facility out beyond 111 on the west side?
So I know they've done,
I know
in
they,
the last year, they've done some new facilities in the city. I'm not as familiar with the ones outside the city they've done, so.
there's one out there they're doing for an assembly project for rockets and manned spacecraft, that type of thing, so. It's up in what I thought was Kennecott property, so I'm just wondering if that was part of this trade.
It may have been, I'm not sure though.
We didn't think that this piece that the Kennecott now owns would be developed either.
Agreed.
I just want us to have a master plan that's existing when it does happen, if it does happen. So that we're just not surprised and
Sorry, if you're,
go ahead.
what's the current zoning of the blue areas that Kennecott land owns?
It is,
Bigger.
it's all manufacturing with one exception, and that, I'll go back to this map. So this area here, just north of Wood Hollow is zoned A. Everything else is manufacturing.
So I would expect that would be the first sections that would get redeveloped. And they would need to come in and do a zoning change. We could get a development agreement. And make sure we have a development that we like. Is that correct? Am I right on that?
If they, taking, for example, the agricultural property, if they wanted to do, say, a subdivision, yes, they would need to rezone it. However, on the piece that's zoned manufacturing, if they wanted to do industrial, they could do that today under the current zoning.
But if they wanted to make a development like Daybreak, come in with housing, then they would
Yep, absolutely.
zoning change and development agreement. Huh?
You said the word.
Well, I mean, I think we
If they're
know
at
what,
home.
what Kennecott land's good at doing, and that would make total sense to do a nice residential development there. So,
So what is the life expectancy of the gravel pits?
So as I've talked with the gravel pits, the way they've explained it to me without putting a time frame on it is that as land values appreciate, it gets to the point where it's more economical to buy land somewhere else that's less expensive, extract there, and then sell the property here. And at least in talking with Geneva, from their perspective, we're there. Now, with the other two, I've not heard that, but with Geneva, they feel like they're at that point.
How deep have they gone? Are they even with Mountain View? Are they quite lower?
Sure, yeah, sure,
Okay.
how far they've gone.
I have a friend that bought in a gravel pit in Taylorsville, just on the south side of 54. Oh heavens, 30 years ago. So I just didn't know if it'd be a big hole like that or if it's pretty level. So I'll do it. I'll go for a ride. Okay, because that, manufacturing down in a hole and then having housing south of 62 would still give those homes the view. It's whether or not we can have nice homes there or if we're gonna,
This is the West Valley Bench.
yeah, it really is. And it's the perfect place for estate homes. We just don't want to put cracker boxes out there where they have such a great view.
Gonna see if we could redistrict to put my district in part of this so I can move there. Just kidding. But they look nice. Those views look awesome.
And as we've been going through all of these, we obviously have the communities and residents in mind, but in my mind, I mean, specifically in this area with Diamond Summit and Sunset Hills, and I mean, these folks already feel like they're the island, you know, left out there, and they're the ones that talk about being annexed to West Jordan and all of this. I think this is one piece that definitely needs that attention and that real input from these folks out there as well. That what they envision, you know, as well, really be taken into consideration too.
And to that point, with our planning commission, our newest commissioner, Renee Layton, actually lives in Diamond Summit. And she actually preferred the, which was more residential, because she felt like, to your point, that there'd be less of an island, right? There'd be more, well, it was kind of she's worried about response times already, right? And so she's like, if it means that by having more housing, we get more attention, right? Then yes, but if not, then no, if that makes sense.
You say it's option A or B?
So
What
he's
about
the
housing?
one with more residential, excuse me.
Well, for me, that strip just being solid residential and try and put a pad somewhere to support the industrial and the residential, that could be restaurants. I mean, they have a Walmart right there, but maybe a shopping area somewhere in there along U-111. Capture people from that north side of West Jordan, south side of Magna, west side of West Valley. So maybe do commercial where that little bump out is in 62, where it doesn't go straight through.
So in this corner here.
Yeah, and maybe all along 111 right there. I don't know how many acres is the 6,200 light yellow color?
So this
Not right there, yeah.
area here, so I know the whole thing is, over 800. So if I remember right, the south of 62, kind of this green area here is about 200 is what I remember, but
Okay, 200 acres.
maybe a little bit less than that.
Yeah, and give them some more convenience so they don't have to drive so far to get food, get different things.
Why don't you guys, like, you done, ma'am?
Yep.
Okay, why don't you guys like moratorium, maybe just sit down and try to figure out July. I agree with all of them. This is such a beautiful piece of property and huge. We can turn that into something for 50 years from now, 100 years from now. I personally don't like industrial area. Yeah. Got like a nice community. People can live there and can shop there.
And if we were to explore, we call a temporary land use regulation or moratorium, what kinds of things would the council, like what other information would the council like if we were to take kind of a deeper dive in this area?
I just had one question, and that would be, what would be appropriate, or what would Excel find acceptable uses for the property around? So we don't want to upset Excel, but maybe we have other uses across from 54th, and then give us more flexibility with the rest of it below that. Because industrial is tough to have right next to our West Bench.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know I know both John and I have had conversations with Excel, and if you were to ask them, they would prefer option A, which is basically the more industrial, the better, because they're concerned that even though they've been there a long time, if you have homes encroaching, someone's going to complain about either, what they do or what they admit or something, and that's going to cause a problem for them. They had an experience in California where they had a facility that had been there for many, many years, and over time, residential kind of encroached on it. And people, started looking into, okay, what they do. And even though they were fully compliant with all the laws, people still had concerns about what they did. And so that's a major concern for them.
We've got the same thing in West Jordan where that airport out there has been there since
Oh, yeah.
World War II. People moved in around it and then started complaining about it.
The
Those planes
helicopters are
fly
still
over
under-
us.
The helicopters too.
The property that, I'm sorry,
No.
the property that's being held by Deseret Holding Title
Mhm.
Company.
Yeah.
Do we have any inkling on what that could potentially, what they would do with that have been?
So we've talked to them about that. I know they're not, just speaking candidly, they're not fans about large lot housing on that. I think, and when we've talked about industrial, I think they were open to that, or some other kind of mix of residential with some commercial. But just our conversations with them, they definitely don't love a larger lot, single family scenario on that.
Kennecott want that on their property.
It's really close to Hexel though.
Yeah.
I mean, this blue piece right next to it. Yeah, I still think the preference would be large lot residential out there and take advantage of our elevation and views. And the purple is theirs as well. Would it be feasible at all to put large lot residential along U-111? And then the industrial back in where the gravel pit is, closer to Mountain View? So,
Maybe more, if I'm understanding, so having residential here, but industrial here.
yeah, and just have a strip, just go down, I don't know how many acres deep.
Yeah, I can think of, like, for example, there are places in North Salt Lake, for example, where you've got residential on one side, industrial on the other. It's usually not nice, like really nice residential in those situations, just because you have that industrial neighbor. So unless you had some kind of really significant divider buffer there, you'd have to have some kind of transition, or maybe townhomes or something, right? That you kind of build back up to something that's nicer perhaps. But again, you also have Mountain View, right, too there. So that's you're kind of sandwiched a little bit.
So what is the blue line going through? Is it a railroad, a canal?
So I know there is a rail line
Is
that
that what that
runs
is?
through here, but it's not active. In fact, we've actually built 6200 South was built over the rail line without a crossing. So while it is a Kennecott line, so if you look at this image, you can kind of see that blue
Right,
line that runs.
that's what I was looking at.
That's a Kennecott owned rail line, but it's inactive.
Because not knowing how deep that is, that could be the dividing line.
This is big enough property, there could be built-in buffers. I mean, it really is. I've heard, airport number 2 talked about it as the sacred cow, they're never gonna redevelop, but this is just as big when you just the blue and then the other colors, you take out the red, it's just as big as probably airport number 2 acreage, so it should be fun, but we gotta do it right.
Yeah, I think this one will take more than just one meeting.
Sure.
Might take a field trip as well.
Yeah, I agree.
And if that's something, if the council like, we could even, organize a group field trip out to the site and drive it. And yeah, we're happy to have more conversations, and it sounds like maybe we're not quite ready to give some direction here. But, and so aside from maybe doing a field trip, where there are other things, whether it's, more research or other things that we can do to help the council to make a decision here or provide some direction here.
Could you do some? I mean, I could too, I guess we all could, but could you do some research on developments of this size? Kind of what they look like now and examples from across the country that 800 acres and some ideas of what we could be looking at.
Good idea.
You know, there's a development in Atlanta where they have I don't know what it's a belt trail. It's an old railroad trail. And it's a nice open green space. Wider than this room, I think, but about this. That's a walking, and then there's restaurants along the sides. So along the one side, you can stop and get coffees, pastries, whatever. And then there's housing incorporated with it. So that might be an idea too for the west side of that rail.
Rail line out there that we could make.
That's what, yeah,
Kind of has a nice radius to it.
yeah, and then maybe all that yellow, be higher, nicer homes. I think there's a lot of different options for it, looking at the long range plan of it.
So there was mention of a possible moratorium. Is that something the council wants to pursue as a moratorium here, or is that premature?
Has anybody really been interested in anything?
The only one that we actually have some active development here right across from Hexel for industrial. So that's this, which, that one, again, where it's right across from Hexel, that seems to make sense. It's more your typical light industrial kind of flex space. And as I mentioned, we've had several conversations with Geneva about developing this for more, something like you would see in ARA or 201 Commerce, the larger industrial buildings. Just no formal applications yet.
Yeah, if there's interest, I think it would be appropriate to do a moratorium. There's a really nice new industrial area out where the RC Willey or warehouse used to be, where you go pick up your stuff. It might still be there, but just across 56 to the west, that is beautiful. If you could ever think industrial would be beautiful. And so we could do a field trip out there as well.
What was the location again, Mayor?
So there's that Deseret Trucking and the old RC Willey warehouse on the east side of 56, and it's across the street west. That's where one of our Firestone insulation moved out there. We lost that business,
13th South maybe, or
something like that,
Burton Lumber is.
further north than Burton. But it's really pretty. I can get an exact address for you if you want.
Is that part of it?
I think it would be
Not
nice
for-
if a professional city planner looked at this as a blank canvas. You know, what would they do to build there and make it a place that would be a gem for 100 years and give us some ideas.
Sure.
Reach for the sky.
Okay, so we will look into a moratorium. And that'll be something that would come back to the council for your consideration. Scheduling a field trip and then also just doing more exploring, looking at other examples of projects that are of this scale.
Yeah. And our new city manager may have already had some experience with something like this, so that might be some insight too from a different state. I don't know.
Not just as experienced as Eagle Mountain.
Oh, yeah, Eagle Mountain starting from
That
scratch.
was a lot of
Yeah.
space that.
There was a lot of blank canvas there for sure.
Yeah. So,
And they probably made some mistakes
Yeah.
and we can learn from those.
Yeah.
yep,
I don't know which one of you said it, but that helped me to kind of re-envision this when you said it's our east bench, right? It's the west bench.
Yeah.
yes.
And not that we have to mirror anything that's over there, but now there's ideas that I hadn't thought of before that when I think about, the East, and I spent a lot of time at the U, and so.
Yeah.
Research Park, clinical excellence, some of those cool little mixed use stuff up there that might fit here that I didn't think about before. So
Right.
it's nice to re-envision that.
Yeah, and then if we had some supporting restaurants for your sauna right across and different things like that, I mean, we could turn that whole area upside down.
So I do have one more question, not related to this, in that we had kind of a placeholder for other areas in the city. And I know, Mayor, you had mentioned talking about the north part of 5600 West. But if there are any other areas that we haven't already covered that you have a particular interest in, then we can kind of talk about those in an upcoming meeting. So we've kind of have that as a placeholder. And right now, it's just the one area that you'd mentioned, Mayor, but if there are any others that you're interested in talking about that we haven't already covered, that'd be the time to do that, so.
So our agricultural area out on the northwest, is that all pretty much just agriculture and then residential?
So,
Any of the bigger lots?
yeah, so you're talking out by where a lot of the new industrial's going, along 201?
Yeah, and south of
South
that,
of the
between like 35th and
Parkway.
Parkway.
Oh, south of Parkway. Yeah, so, anything south of Parkway, we're showing as residential right now. But yeah, if there's a change contemplated there, that's something we can look at, but we'd assume that would stay.
Yeah, I just didn't know for sure if we had it marked residential. Okay. Okay, sounds great. Thank you. Okay, to our council calendar, did anyone have any concerns? And you'll all be at the Easter egg hunt, 8:30 on Saturday. Future agenda items. I had something, but I didn't write it down. So next week. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have one, it's kind of, I don't know, maybe this one for John. I wonder about, when the city manager gonna be here, and remember it's April, but it's the first week in April, or yep, April 8th, he will be here.
Okay, seeing no future agenda items,
Sorry. So there's one, I think we've all got an email from a Mr. Conley requesting consideration for using his garage as business space. And I know we've discussed this before and it wasn't popular, but I felt I should at least bring it up. And if we had anyone who wanted to entertain that, honestly, this is the first one that I've heard of in a long, long time. So it's not like there's been a rash of these requests, but that was one I wanted to bring up on behalf of Mr. Conley. And then another one I think is timely, is if there is any interest among my colleagues here to discuss ranked choice voting as a potential option, since that pilot period is still.
put those for staff to go over.
There was some discussion about ranked choice in the legislature.
A lot, yeah.
I know they were debating back and forth. I never did hear how that came out at the end.
It's a weird topic because both parties, or the two big
Everybody.
parties, right, use that in the convention system and elsewhere. But in terms of municipal, extending that to municipal, and we've had that here as well, you can't compare Vineyard to us, when Salt Lake City is definitely more comparable, but yeah, I don't know. I'm still interested in learning about it and maybe taking a deeper dive into how the other cities reacted to it. If it was a nightmare, then we don't want to do it. But if there were some promising features to it, I'd like to at least consider.
Not like, in course, you brought up a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Yes.
we've discussed before.
Had
so-
discussions before.
How was I can remember it. Last time we studied that, you did had a comparison with like Sandy and other places, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
So we've had another election cycle since that one occurred.
Mhm.
But
So that's
Yeah.
what I was hoping to see if there's any, now that we've been through 2 cycles
Sure,
with
yeah.
other people doing it.
and I'd be happy, I can get feedback from those that participated this last time just to see what experiences they had. If the council would like me to. Yeah. I can
I'd be
absolutely do
interested.
that.
Anybody else interested in that?
Yes.
And then was I the only one that got that email from Mr. Conley then? Maybe.
I sent another one
Oh,
this
okay.
afternoon.
Okay, good.
I haven't seen one
I
today.
know it was a bit ago. But it does seem like a one-off to me that, should there be a change made, it would have, it would
Affect
have
a
a
lot
big
of people.
impact, correct?
And we've had so many people come to our open meetings complaining about the small tire shop in a guy's garage and this in a person's garage and a person's garage. And so,
Correct. And my
for me,
response,
yeah.
to be fair, my response to him was, we've discussed this before and there wasn't a ton of interest, but I said,
We'll bring it up again, yeah.
as your representative, I'll bring it up, but no guarantees.
Yeah, Mr. Pastrick might have some new information and what the impact would be, so.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. Council reports.
I've attended 2 CDBG meetings. Councilman Fitzsimano is on the committee as well, so it's been great to be involved in that. I appreciate administration including us on that. And there were 11 applicants, 2 have withdrawn. So we're still in the process. I attended a meeting earlier today where the applicants were able to come in if they wanted to and pitch their application in front of the committee. So it's been a good experience to see some of the nonprofits that work in our city and the services they provide.
And I would applaud the process. I think it's very thorough. Someone who does this for a living, for the company I work for. I think the vetting process is pretty impressive. It's pretty stringent.
I took my kids out buckling in the Necker Lake and we had a good time outdoor and it was fun.
They let you kayak out there?
No.
I was just picking up garbage,
Yeah, good garbage.
clean and beautiful, and a couple organizations helped them out.
That's right. That's right.
Saw your picture online, looked like you were cold and wet.
So last Monday, interfaith groups from the Tonga community had a meeting here in this room and are looking at joining the My Hometown Interfaith Group. And 3 or 4 of them attended Wednesday's interfaith group meeting. So that looks promising to grow that organization within the city. And then last Thursday or Friday night, I went to the Work Activity Center. They had their first annual gala. And it's over in Chesterfield on 2320 and about 13th West. And it was really nice. What they do in that facility, helping people with handicap, disabilities is just phenomenal. The state has a waiting list of over 5,000 people for this opportunity. And they have artists that in September, they'll have an auction and their artwork is beautiful and you can't figure out how they can paint with their abilities, but they do a beautiful job. The lady spoke. It's had 2 strokes and she wasn't even supposed to live. And she gave a lovely talk and it was really a good event. Someone from the facility is going to come to one of our meetings, but they've changed the name to Ability Inclusion Center. So Ability will be their new name. And so I asked her when she came to maybe bring some of the artwork so you could really see what goes on there. But another hidden gem that I had no idea was in the city and just doing great things. So both of those events were really, really nice. So. Okay. And I don't think we have anything else. Oh, yes, we do. We'll keep going to the next page. So Housing Authority. Mr. Morris, do you want to come up and give us a review of what's going to be our agenda next week?
Thank you. I'll start on page 1 and finish on page 458. I apologize that is so long. As part of our ongoing funding relationship with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Housing Authority has to submit an annual plan on an annual basis, and on occasions, part of that, when HUD changes the rules in a significant manner, we have to update our administrative plan. This is an update of that administrative plan that we need to, the Housing Authority Board needs to pass in order for us to demonstrate to HUD that we are willing and able to comply with the new regulations that are in the process of coming down. That's really it.
Any questions for Mr. Morris? Don's the chair, so.
Well, I tried getting through, I think I got through 20 pages before I gave up, but when I called Lane and talked to him, he said, yeah, it's basically just they send us out, this is what we want filled out. We check the boxes and send it back in. So it follows the federal government Paperwork Reduction Act. I mean, only having 463 pages of boxes to fill in, so.
Okay, anyone have any concerns or questions?
Catch my sarcasm.
Okay, seeing none, thank you. All right, do we have a need for a closed session?
We do not.
Okay, one more action item. All in favor, please say aye.
All right.
And we stand adjourned. See you.